So, what I want to focus on and talk about is some of the challenges in terms of that, you know, all of us are, that if you're a teacher, that you're making the adjustment to teaching kids remotely, if you're a parent of kids through this experience, as well as the possibility that your kids could walk in the door at any moment, like mine just did during the webinar. And and I've got three myself, as Katie mentioned. So we always have that possibility, and adjusting to giving them the time and using that time effectively. And I think we all have ambitious ideas about what to do with that time. Kids are going through a lot of challenges right now. And, here at Socrates, we provide a great tool that helps teachers to be able to enable remote learning, as well as people to be able to practice at home. But online learning is just one component. And so a lot of what we want to focus on today is really everything that goes on around that, and the part of the experience and the challenges that kids have and the parents have helping them out. Yeah, kids have a lot of extra time on their hands, and they're probably doing a lot of this with that time when you're not structuring it for them. So we'll talk about some of the issues. And kids also challenge that they miss their families outside of their home. They miss their friends. So this is a very hard time for kids making this adjustment, as well as it is for adults. So we want to help them to get through this experience by giving them a more structured workday and more things to do. We'll talk a little bit about what schools are doing, as well as what you can do at home. As a parent, you're probably struggling with some of these kinds of experiences, or just happened to me actually just a minute ago. My son walked in, but you've got the problem that you're trying to do your work if you're a work from home parent at the same time that you're trying to be a teacher, trying to be a tutor, trying to be a babysitter. There's just a lot to do and a lot to balance. And if you're not able to give them the attention, then they're not able to do something productive with the time. So we'll talk about some strategies that you can employ as a parent to be able to make that easier. And I'll share some of what has worked for me, some of what has not worked for me, and some of what I know has worked for others. But this is really hard for parents as well as for the kids. And, the level of ways that schools are engaging with the kids is really all over the map, and it's going to depend on where you are, the district policies that you have. What we see is schools doing some online learning with tools like Socrates, and many of them are also doing things like homework packets, or some are doing exclusively things like homework packets, where they're sending home either through something like Google Classroom, or they're sending actual physical packets home, or they're sending classwork out by email. And a lot of these tend to be more reading assignments. I've got, my son's teacher sends him a reading of a book every morning. There's a variety of things they're doing. Some teachers are trying Zoom meetings. And if you have seen a group of 38-year-olds try to do a Zoom meeting, I can tell you if you haven't, it's a very interesting experience to see. It's not exactly as effective as being in the classroom. And part of it, is that the kids spend a lot of time playing with the technology. It's hard to keep them interested and engaging. If you leave things like the chat available, they chat to each other. There's a lot of chaos involved in that experience, and it's hard for that to replace actual classrooms. And then you have some things like, some of the TV stations are broadcasting different lessons and other topics to the wider audience. Some are doing nothing at all and just accepting that school's closed for the rest of the time period. So it varies a lot, and what you're going to be seeing is going to be different depending on where you are. And part of it, I think, as we talk about this, is that kids need more than just busy work. And a lot of what the schools are able to give them is really work to reinforce skills that they have, and it's valuable. But nobody was really prepared for this. And so one of the challenges that a lot of the school districts have is that they're not able to continue to teach new topics, because if they do, and they've got some kids who have access to computers and access to internet, and some kids who don't, then basically they've created an unequal learning environment. So what most school districts are doing is they're just providing work to reinforce skills with the kids, to keep them busy, and to get them to this time period, but they're not necessarily progressing them a lot with new content. And a challenge that they have is that attendance is really low. And here in in Las Vegas, they've had challenges with getting as few as 30% of the kids actually engaging with distance learning. And so these challenges are going to be different from district to district. Everybody's going to be struggling with it in different ways. And depending on the extent to which schools in your area were able to distribute computers, able to distribute internet access, and prepared for this kind of situation, the type of work that they're going to get is going to be different. So if you don't structure the time with them, then the time they're going to spend is going to look probably something like this, where they're going to be playing Minecraft, playing Roblox, playing Nintendo, and other things. And as a parent, I know one of the challenges is you want to keep them doing something productive with that time, but one of the challenges you have is you have to do your own work. And so it's easy to fall back on them doing what they want in order to get things done, so you're able to continue to retain your own job. Katie, anything you want to add in regards to the current school environment?
Well, everything's about balance. And as a parent, you have to make your own decisions about your children and their learning and where you think that you want them to emphasize their time. Right now, the busy work that schools create may or may not be beneficial, and they're not being graded on it right now. So it just depends whether or not you want to take charge of their learning and have it continue on, or just comply with some of the busy work that's been given. So that's kind of a parent's judgment based on their own children and where they see the time best being spent. And like even looking at all these tools, there are ways to make every one of these tools educational for your child, so that it can be a meeting of the minds. You know, you get this much time on this, but you need to do this in order to keep playing.
And that's a lot of what we'll talk about is some of the creativity you can do in managing that screen time and making it effective, as well as giving them activities that don't involve the screen time. As Katie mentioned, you know, that there's one of the fundamental principles we have in the design of Socrates is gamification to encourage kids to learn more. And those same concepts of gamification can be applied to offline activities, can be applied, as you mentioned, to any tool that they're using. Isn't necessarily built in. You're going to have to create it around it, but there's a lot that you can do around that as well. So I think that part of it is figuring out what amount of the time they should be on the screens during the day, whether it's screen time that they're doing that's for fun, or whether it's screen time that's responding to tasks and work given to them by the schools. Certainly it's not, it doesn't make sense to have them just sitting in front of a computer trying to learn 8 hours a day. Even in schools that doesn't happen. They've got recesses, they got lunch breaks. So there's an aspect of managing that time that's really important. And when you look at this, I thought the CDC puts this out, and this was released pre-COVID, but I think it gives you a good idea of the idea of balancing screen time with exercise and physical activity. So they're showing that children ages 8 to 10 spend about 6 hours a day in front of screens, and instead they could be playing a game of basketball, they could be walking the dog, they could be dancing. And so part of what we're going to be talking about a little bit is some activities that you can do with the kids that aren't educational in the traditional Common Core sense, but are valuable to them to learn skills, to expand their capabilities, and to establish balance to their day, so that they get the breaks and they get the time to exercise and do other things, and not spend all their day and time on the screens. You know, depending on when the school day is for your particular school year ends for your particular district, you might be just a couple of weeks from the end of your school year. You might be a month or so away from your school year, but at that point they're going to enter the summer, and they're not going to be getting those assignments from their teacher anymore. But all the concepts that we're going to talk about still 100% apply in being able to help them to be able to use that time better over the summer.
And you can start setting up some schedules and routines, because we don't know what's going to happen in the fall, and we don't know what school is going to look like then. But keeping a regular routine and starting to establish that you're the guidance of learning in your home, and having that schedule continue throughout the summer, especially if they're not able to get outside, having that routine just continue on even when the school stops is really important, because doing nothing and just sitting at the home anyway for small children, that is not good for them. That is not healthy for them. So keeping whatever routine you start to set up now through the summer is only going to benefit them and make your transition into the fall that much easier.
Absolutely. To that point, we're none of us are really sure how long this lasts. I think we all hope that kids are able to go back in the fall, but we don't know, and there might be changes in the way school's structured, and we'll talk a little about that towards the end as well. Exercise needs to be a part of that, and spending time outside. The weather in most parts of the country is good for this right now, and so before it gets too hot, it's great to get them on a regular schedule of spending time outside. Keep in mind in school they have PE classes, they have recesses, so they're doing that. But encouraging them to spend time outside is important, and in the backyard, in the front yard, depending on your neighborhood. But that's something that's really important.
Well,
One thing
and
that
too, I mean, if you realize that in a typical school day, kids walk down the hall, they walk from one class to another. In your house, they're walking from their bedroom to the living room to the kitchen. There's not a lot of physical activity going on within a given day when you're stuck inside the home. So if you're not deliberately creating those opportunities for kids to be physical, to actually burn some calories, move around, they're going to become very sedentary, and that is not healthy.
And actually, Katie mentioned that one of those spots that they walk to is the kitchen, so they're eating more snacks more often, and that's also something that's part of what you need to control.
Yep.
There's a lot of opportunity beyond the traditional educational content to spend that time teaching your kids more life skills, and teaching kids how to do things like cooking, do laundry, cleaning around the house, gardening. Part of it, I kind of look at this and say, whatever it is that you always say to yourself, if I had time, I would teach my kids fill in the blank. This is the time to do that. Whatever time you're able to give them, but it's great to have them start to get engaged in doing those kinds of things. Money management is another one that both Katie and I both have a lot of personal passion about teaching kids money management. And that's something that, again, there's a lot of opportunity to do that kind of thing now. Critical thinking in general, and we've done some really creative things in my household around that, that we're encouraging, spreading the word about. One is to do project-based learning activities. So these two actually that's my 9-year-old and my 8-year-old. And so we gave them a project to create a business, start their own business, and then do a presentation about that business to myself and my wife. So they decided to start up a cleaning business. It's called Helping Hands, and you can see the logo that they created. And this presentation included actually a jingle that my daughter wrote. So she did a jingle. They did a presentation and explained to us about the Helping Hands service. And we liked it so much that we hired them to now do chores around the house. And so, as part of that project, my kids have a spreadsheet where they keep track of all the cleaning that they do. And at the end of the week, they add it all up. They send us an invoice. We give them payment. Actually, the kids asked me why we hadn't paid them yet, and I reminded them they hadn't sent us an invoice, and a real customer doesn't pay you if you don't invoice them. And so there's that. Before that, we did a project with them where they researched a different country and did a presentation on the country. Anything that involves researching something, figuring something out, gives them time to use a computer in a creative way to research something, to look it up, and then create a presentation. My son has become quite proficient at Google Slides. And so those kinds of things encourage them to take something from beginning to end, involve a whole bunch of different skills, and allow them to leverage what they learned at home and in the classroom simultaneously. Could be having them do debates about things, but project-based learning activities is a great thing where if you just spend a little bit of time with them planning it, then you can let them work on their own and then come back to you with the results. And the more of these you do, the better they're going to get.
And honestly, there are so many out on the web that you can just, cheat, go look one up. You don't have to come up with all these ideas by yourselves. In education, the teachers pay teachers, and Pinterest, and all these different locations that have already pre-made project-based learning with the templates and everything for you. So you don't have to come up with ideas on your own. You put in your child's grade level, you look for that project, and then, like I said, the work is done for you already. So don't make it too hard on yourself.
And you mentioned that one thing that also worked about this was getting them to work as a team, which isn't always easy with a brother and sister, but getting them to work together, which is team building activity. Actually, they also hired their 4-year-old sister, but they recently fired her because she wasn't working hard enough. So they're talking about rehiring her. We'll see how that goes. So reading, coming back to core thing that is always available and always something that's easy to do, is reading books and giving them quiet time where they're off the electronics and they're required to read, and let them try different kinds of books. This is a great opportunity to do that. And particularly as you look into the summer months, if you're in an area where it's going to get too hot to spend time outside, it's a good opportunity to do that. Your local libraries probably have lots of ebooks and other resources, and we're going to start making some things available through Socrates as well, through our partnership with Brightstar. So you'll be hearing more about that. So we'll have a variety of ebooks available that you'll be able to download and use. But your libraries, I think a lot of people are surprised at how many digital resources the libraries offer to them. Socrates actually has available in many libraries. Writing a paper, a lot of the assignments they're going to get from the schools are going to be something like read this passage and write a response to it, because that's a very common aspect of how they're taught and how they practice their Common Core skills. But you don't necessarily want to replicate the same thing, because they're probably doing that, but having them do something like write a research paper, give them a topic, have them research it, write the results, and creating PowerPoints, a book report. I thought it was a really fun idea to, rather than do a book report in the traditional sense, do it in a PowerPoint presentation and tell me the story about why you like this book. So there's ideas like that you can leverage a lot of tools that you probably already have in your household.
And also, I want to encourage you to find a series of books for your children to read. If you have a reluctant reader like my son was, I could always get him hooked on a series, reading the first book with him. And we do he reads a page, I read a page, he reads a page, I read a page, and then we talk about it until he gets to that independent level. And authors tend to use that same vocabulary, same style of writing, the characters are the same. So when you choose a series, it really helps and lends for that success on book 2, 3, 4, and 5 with your children. So getting them to try and have the goal of finishing a series by the end of the summer, it can increase their grade level significantly. I know my son went up a full grade level one summer just from us reading Magic Treehouse books. And so that definitely is a huge help, and it makes it easy because they're not shopping for a book for a long time.
And reading was a big part of many of our childhoods. We didn't have access to all electronics. I'd be dating myself slightly, but I didn't have any of that when I was in elementary school, and so reading was a big part of my life, and it's a good opportunity to get them to reinforce that with the kids. Celebrating success, as I mentioned, this is kind of a core principle of how Socrates designed, is a lot of rewards, and very similar aspect can be applied in your home. And we've done this with our kids in one form or another since they were very young, where we have reward charts and they're rewarded for completing particular activities or for following the rules, the instructions, and kids react to this very well. You have to be consistent about it, and sometimes that's hard. But if you're able to be consistent, then they'll appreciate it. They'll be consistent. And when you get to kids, people have different philosophies on this, but I personally believe in the idea of tying financial rewards and allowances so they can spend, so they can get the idea of earning money, saving money, and spending money in ways that they see appropriate. But people have different opinions about that. So it can tie to a physical reward, some kind of to an allowance, to any type of reward that makes sense. It could be more TV time, whatever makes sense for your household. It's in terms of setting work boundaries. I saw this on the internet. And I liked it, that this idea of establishing rules so that, and actually, if I had this 15 minutes ago, so if I was following my own advice here and had 15 minutes ago, maybe my son wouldn't have walked in. But perhaps it's good that he walked in to just demonstrate that we all go through this. But putting a sign up on the door, letting them know when you're available and you're not available, can be really helpful. So and if they're in the stop sign here, I'm working right now, here's other things that you can do right now while you're waiting for me to finish my work. But this is a challenge for all of us who are working from home. So establishing those work boundaries is great. One thing that's really helpful is you are not spending the time in the car commuting back and forth. So you probably do have more time in the day that you can carve out should you choose to do so. But all of us probably are finding that as we work, that if we're working from home, that we tend to work more hours as a result, and use that time but it's important to free up time during the day to spend time with your kids. It could just be taking a walk with them. It could be a variety of things. Establishing a at-home schedule, really important, really valuable. And there's a couple of examples here, but kids in schools have structured days where they know what's going to happen from 1 hour to the next. They know when their lunch is, they know when their recesses are, and that helps them to be able to manage their time and their activities. And you want to try to do the same thing and have them stick to that schedule. And that also is where they can become more responsible over time, and they can stick to that schedule whether you're actively managing or not. So a lot of examples here of time you can spend, and that can include things like a family walk or a family activity that they know is going to happen during the day, and that you're going to spend that time with them.
Yeah.
And and then also sharing your successes and the results. I think that as you go through and try different things, it's really valuable to share with other parents what you've done that's been successful, and get ideas from other parents and try them in your own household. Not every idea is going to work for every household. Everybody's a little bit different, but hearing what other people are doing allows you to try those kind of different results. And you can see some great examples here of projects that could be done in a classroom, could be done outside of a classroom. As parents, you probably know that a lot of these kinds of projects you're spending a lot of time helping the kids on anyway when the classroom assigns them. So you might as well have them doing that, whether or not they're assigned by a teacher, and having them practice the skills. It's a great opportunity to open up kids' eyes to a lot of different things that that they're interested in, and expanding their minds. There's even things you can do in terms of educational, when they are spending time in front of the screens, educational TV shows that they can be watching that are fun and engaging. And when it comes to mind that my kids love is Liberty Kids, which is a show about a cartoon show about the Revolutionary War, where kids go through the Revolutionary War experiences. Is a great example of something that's made for kids but teaches them about history. There's lots of things, back to my kids like brain games, for example, and there's other shows like that that can teach them different things that there might not be time for in the traditional classroom environment, but hence it keeps their skills sharp. Anything you'd add to that, Katie?
Just making sure that TV time is purposeful, and that it, either has more questions for the children to do research on after watching an educational TV show, or an idea for their own TV show, or, just things that will get them thinking and being creative.
That's right. Actually, we're going to be announcing shortly a book design contest as well for kids through our partnership with Bright Star, where we'll be sharing the kids can create their own books, and we'll select certain ones to be published. So we'll be sharing more information about that online shortly. There's things like that you can do. And in terms of just thinking about where this is going to go, that I think that as we look at schools returning in the fall, I think we all are speculating as to exactly what's going to happen. Maybe everything will be back 100% to normal. Maybe there's going to be delayed. We might be in a situation where there's a resurgence in the fall. I think as parents, we all need to be better prepared. I think in some cases, a lot of parents are upset at schools for not being better prepared for this, but I think the reality is this is a situation nobody could have anticipated. And so schools have reacted to this as best they can. And some schools were better set up for this than others in terms of having the hardware necessary to give to the kids. And larger school districts sometimes have a harder time reacting to something like this than smaller ones, to be able to be nimble enough to make the change in the time frame. And we also were in a situation where, when this first started, people thought schools were going to be closed for a couple of weeks, and then that couple of weeks became longer and longer. And so the schools have done what they can, but you can enhance that experience. If we are in a situation where kids are home for longer in the fall, it's going to become even more important. And the schools will use the summer to be better prepared for that experience. That does happen. But no matter what, the parents who are home with the kids are going to be a critical part of that experience if the kids are at home. And even if everything does go back to normal, that all of this can be a big part of how you spend time with your kids in the future, enhancing the learning that they have.
Yeah.
You did mention, as far as, Socrates, that a big aspect of what we've been able to do in a remote learning environment. So I think most of the people who are on this webinar are currently using Socrates, and that's how you found out about it. But Socrates is automatically adjusting to your child's abilities and progressing them automatically. So it is continuing to expand their educational exposure. So while they are on the computer, it's a good example of the type of solution that can help to improve their skills. And many schools are using Socrates as a remote learning tool to assign topics to their kids. And so just a reminder that that's out there, that's available to you, encourage you to use it and take advantage of it while it's there. And we are still offering it available to schools as well for the rest of the school year. In addition, if you do have a situation where you do want to have more structured help for your kids, we have just started offering a tutoring edition where what we do is we leverage the Socrates platform, and then we have one of our teachers on staff provide you with feedback on a weekly basis and suggestions about additional activities you can do at home, as well as give you additional information about where your kids need help based upon the exposure and experience they've had within Socrates. So we can help to guide you to improve the skills where they're struggling and give you additional activities both within the application and outside the application that can help them to be more successful. So this is an option that I believe that right now it's discounted to just $10 a month. So very affordable option that's available to you as an add-on to your Socrates experience. And we will be continuing this throughout the summer as well. I thought, before we open up to questions, I thought that I was like Socrates quotes in this for obvious reasons, but this one kind of stuck out, that the secret of change is to focus all of your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And I think that's where we all are in terms of that. We don't know exactly how long it's going to take for things to get back to the way things were. Things may not be exactly the way things were. I think that, perhaps not in school, but in a broader economic sense, people might not travel the same way they used to for years. There might be big differences in the way things are, but it is what it is, and we need to adjust to that. And I thought this was an appropriate quote. And so a big part of your using this at home is that this is your opportunity to build a new way of helping your kids engage both with their schoolwork and beyond what their schoolwork provides, because everything we're talking about are great ideas to apply even when kids are in school, and use that time that you have with them better.
Yeah.
So anything else you'd add before we open for questions, Katie?
No, just that, stay in contact and share with us any strategies that are working, or feel free to ask questions, and we are happy to communicate with you and help you through this time.
All right, so there's a Q&A box if anybody wants to put in a question. And you can also see here while we're waiting for that we do have contact information for both myself and for Katie, as well as additional information about support if you do have any questions about Socrates itself. But both Katie and I are always available and happy to answer any questions you have about any of the concepts that we've talked about today, whether or not they apply to the application. Okay, so let me see the first questions. Okay, so first question is, how do you manage multiple children from multiple grades? That's an interesting question. Katie, I'll get your perspective on that, but I think that part of how I've been doing that in my home is the idea of having to do activities together whenever that is possible. I have a little bit of an advantage, though. I have a 4-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 9-year-old, and so the 8 and 9-year-old are able to do a lot of activities together, not so much the 4-year-old. But I do think that it's really helpful experience for them to do activities together.
Well, and I think if you have a schedule, staggering the schedules, that you make sure you get independent time with each child, given their different age groups. Obviously, older children need less contact time possibly, and a 4-year-old is going to need a lot more contact time. So just kind of varying your time spent with each child based on their own social emotional needs. And yeah, the PE, physical activity, that can totally be done as a team, as the whole group. There's, the cooking, if they're doing that, you can be making a snack, and the 4-year-old is, telling you the color of all the objects. The 6-year-old is doing the mixing, and the 8-year-old is writing down the recipe and writing down the directions so somebody could follow it. So you can easily take that same activity and adjust the requirements based on their age level and what they're able to do.
Right. Thanks, actually, Kate. I'm going to give you the second one here. How do I get my kids to complete all the work I want them to do? I tried to get my kids to follow a routine, but they do not, and I manage them all the time. I think that's a very common problem for parents.
That's a behavior contract. So, behavior contracts, we use them in school all the time when children are being difficult. And it's where you have to make sure that your expectations are extremely clear, what you expect them to get done, that it's reasonable. You sit down with them and you talk about what the day is going to entail and what they're going to accomplish. Then you have the rewards for if, in fact, they did accomplish what they did. It's important that the rewards, depending on their age, if they're very young, the rewards need to be frequent. If they're much older, then the rewards might take longer. And with any contract, you start off giving heavy rewards in the beginning, and you can slowly taper them off as the children are complying. And rewards can be stay up late. I know when my son was really little, I used to tell him, oh, you get a half hour extra. And 5 minutes later, I'm like, all done, time to go to bed. He never knew the difference, but he felt like he earned something. And there were always, little games, or like he loved little tiny Lego kits. I'd put it up on the fireplace and like, oh, you get this at the end of the week if we have happy faces morning and afternoon on our chart. And that means you were following directions, doing work when you were asked to do your work, and having a positive attitude. So those are all things that you, like I said, defining the expectations and then providing the rewards to go with it. And every child is different, whatever their currency is. Their currency could be making a healthy snack. It could be choosing dinner. It could be all kinds of different things. You know your children best. It could be Pokemon cards. I don't know. But you just choose whatever you think is their currency and then provide it with a reasonable amount of effort.
Pokemon cards works in my house.
I thought they were out already. I don't know. They did work at mine for a while.
So next question, how much time should we be spending on Socrates every day to get the best results? We recommend 20 to 30 minutes a day in general to get the best results. And that, certainly, because Socrates is going to be adjusting automatically based on their abilities. So we recommend 20 to 30 minutes. That gives enough questions and content and time for them to be able to do it. And sometimes you'll find the kids will spend additional time just spending their tokens and tickets that they've earned. But it doesn't need to be much more than that. I think that you don't want to have too much screen time, and there's probably other things they're going to do with that screen time in addition to it. So we encourage daily, but we don't encourage spending too much time per day.
Right. And you could break it up into 2 sessions where they do one subject for 10 minutes and then a different subject for the next 10 minutes and alternate days.
That's right. The Socrates, you'll notice, has math, ELA, sight words, science, and we have other topics coming. So you can flip them between the topics so they get a variety of things on any given day as well. And some of you might have teachers who are actually assigning homework to the kids in Socrates, and then Socrates will automatically have them do their homework first. So it's going to automatically make that adjustment for you, and they'll be using the time for homework, and then it will automatically switch over to free learning within Socrates. All right. Do we have any additional? I think that was the last question. A couple things to mention that we do have, if you found this helpful, we do have a repeat of this webinar on Thursday. Certainly share and let people know about it. This isn't something where you have to be an existing user of Socrates to attend the webinar. We wanted to share this with as many people as possible. So please let people know. If you have feedback about this webinar, this is the first one of these that we've done. And so please let us know, and we're happy to come up with to do things differently. Or if you have particular topics you'd like to have us to go into in more depth when we do another one, let us know so that we can provide more of this kind of content in the future. And that webinar is on 2 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday. Yep. So there is a link to that in the email you probably originally received, or on the social media posts if you found out through that. And also remind you that we do have that Socrates is available to parents affected at no charge right now, so you want to take advantage of that as well. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and tie it up for today. Katie, thank you so much for your insights based on your experience, and I hope that that the insights as a parent were helpful to everyone here. Reminder that we have our contact information here, and we're always happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you so much, and good luck.